The Good Lord Bird, starring Ethen Hawke as John Brown, Joshua Caleb Johnson as Henry, or quote unquote Onion, Herbert Point de Jour as Bob, David Diggs as Frederick Douglass. Of course, you know Frederick Diggs from Blind Spotting, the 2018 film that we reviewed. You know, he is the co-writer of the screenplay, and he is the star of the film. David Diggs, right? He plays Frederick Douglass, right? Tamberla Perry is Anna Douglass. You get to see Frederick Douglass's wife, his first wife, in this, right? Then there's oh man, I can't read my own writing here. Here it is. Ben. Who plays Ben? Look right there. Bo Knapp. Yeah, Bo Knapp, right? He is Owen Brown, right? And then Mo Brings Plenty. Mo Brings Plenty is Ottawa Jones. And David Mose plays Dutch Henry. That's the opening sequence in it. And also our favorite actor, Orlando Jones. You know him from American Gods, but he's not on there anymore, so no need to watch, in our opinion, season 3, because they get ready to buffoon that out. First 2 seasons excellent, third season and not so much. He plays the railman in this picture, right? John Brown, born, this is going to be interesting for you. John Brown, born May 9th, 1800.
I'm not surprised.
Passed December 22nd, 1959. 1859. He was only 59.
See, this couldn't help it,
1842 to late 1850s to 1859, Harper's Ferry. This is what this is covering, because what you find out is the person is narrated through the voice of Onion. And so and in the book he traveled with John Brown and his pack for 17 years, right? And John Brown was trying to create a slave liberation movement, right? But not enough slaves joined in. I wonder why. I wonder why they didn't jump in when he was getting ready to get Harper's Ferry. I don't know why they didn't jump in. I wonder what that was about. I wonder what that was about, right?
Everybody got God on their side.
We're playing the trailer.
Seems like from this episode, one jumped in. Well, no, 2 slaves so far jumped in.
But we're talking about when it got to Harper's Ferry.
When it got to Harper's Ferry, How many was with
I don't know. We're going to play the trailer. Look, only about 10.
Okay.
But anyway, look. First person tried, convicted, executed for treason in the United States of America. He was tried in the Commonwealth of Virginia on treason to the United States of America, and he was the first person tried, convicted, and executed on treason. The Good Lord Bird, the story of John Brown and what led up to the Battle of Harper's Ferry, told through the eyes of a liberated ex-slave named Onion, told with drama and humor as intended by James McBride, the author of The Good Lord Bird, right? Now there's some uncomfortable truths that are going to come up in this piece. Let me say this before we move on to the uncomfortable truth. Let me say that when you've been watching movies as long as we have, you will come across seeing actors like Ethen Hawke when they're younger. So do you want to see a film where Ethen Hawke is about the same age as Joshua Caleb Johnson, who plays Onion? Then you want to see the movie Dead Poet Society starring Robin Williams. If you have never seen Dead Poet Society, it is another film of substance, right? And I had a rap group that I was working with in the 90s. The film came out in the 90s, right? And they were influenced by the Dead Poets Society, so they called their collective the Dead Poets, right? And representing the hip hop. You know, hip hop wasn't like it used to be. You know, hip hop wasn't even 40 years old then. But anyway, it's funny. But you know, Dead Poets Society, you have to see that. And of course, you know him from Training Day with Denzel and plus so many other films. But yeah, you can see that there. Now, James McBride. James McBride is the writer of A Good Lord Bird. And of course, Crazy D has cut up a video package. It gives a pretty good synopsis besides the synopsis that we brought here just now. It brings a pretty good synopsis of through the mind of James McBride, right? So we're going to go ahead and play this without further ado. Here we go.
The Good Lord Bird is the memoir of a 103-year-old black man who claimed to have served with the great abolitionist John Brown. He had to pretend to be a girl to do it.
I was born a colored man, and don't you forget it, but I lived as a colored woman for 17 years. The words of Kansas-born slave Henry or Henrietta Shackelford, who in the novel The Good Lord Bird becomes one of the ragtag followers of the abolitionist John Brown and survives to tell of the raid on Harper's Ferry. This is the third novel by James McBride. He's also author of the best-selling memoir, The Color of Water, a black man's tribute to his white mother. And first, congratulations to you.
Thank you very much.
So the story of John Brown has been written and written about in nonfiction and fiction. You, felt you had something more to tell?
I was born a colored man, and don't you forget it. But I lived as a colored woman for 17 years. My pa was a full-blooded Negro out of Osawatomie in Kansas Territory, north of Fort Scott, near Lawrence. Pa was a barber by trade, though that never gave him full satisfaction.
This is a very funny book about a very serious subject. I mean, why did you want to put humor into it, into the life of John Brown and slavery?
Slavery is such a droll subject, and it's depressing. I didn't want to write a book that was depressing. You know, I don't want to read a book that's depressing. So I just thought that, and John Brown was so funny. I mean, he wasn't funny. He was actually had no sense of humor at all, right, which made him a perfect person to make fun of.
All those pictures of him and the you know,
so strict and just so stern looking, and he was very religious, and it just made him a perfect caricature item.
Dutch Henry's Tavern sat right near the Missouri border. It served as a kind of post office, courthouse, rumor mill, and gin house for Missouri rebels who come across the Kansas line to drink, throw cards, tell lies, frequent whores, and holler to the moon about niggas taking over the world and the white man's constitutional rights being thrown in the outhouse by the Yankees and so forth.
Let me hold right there for a minute. The way that he opens in the writing, when you watch episode 1, the way that he describes what's happening in this tavern, post office, barbershop, shoe shine box. It's a building. And inside this building, all this is happening. It's a bar, it's a barbershop, it's a shoe shine shop, it's the post office. All this is happening, and you see this, and listening to the way that he reads that, and knowing how we saw, and for those who have seen the first episode of The Good Lord Bird, you can hear it and see it. You can see it in your mind coming to life. And the way that it's captured on film is almost identical. It's amazing to hear. So let me back it up just a little so that you can get the full effect. We don't want you to miss any of his interview portions. I just had to stop and say that is just amazing how books and written literature can take you places in your mind. Right? And then when you see the movie, you say, wow.
Yeah.
By the Yankees and so forth.
And the way in is this wonderful character, Henrietta, who's nicknamed by John Brown Onion, Little Onion, right? A vernacular voice that you write in, a black voice telling this story.
Well, I love that old country, that old country talk. We still have a lot of Americans who talk like that, black and white, that sort of direct black vernacular of, I was born by the river and the kind of hee-haw chit-chat. Mm-hmm. A lot of the old men in my family talk like that. And I always wanted to find a way to put that in a narrative, and this was just the perfect place.
But come spring, talk in Dutch circled around a certain murderous white scoundrel named Old John Brown, a Yank from back east who come to Kansas territory to stir up trouble with his gang of sons called the Potawatomi Rifles. To hear them tell it, Old John Brown and his murderous sons planned to deaden every man, woman, and child on the prairie. Old John Brown stole horses. Old John Brown burned homesteads. Old John Brown raped women and hacked off heads. Old John Brown done this, and Old John Brown done that. And why, by God, by the time they was done with him, Old John Brown sounded like the most onerous, murderous, low-down son of a bitch you ever saw. And I resolved that if I was ever to run across him, why, by God, I would do him in myself.
Along the way, you're messing with some big icons. I mean, John Brown, of course. Frederick Douglass comes in for a cameo here, and it's not the most reverent view of Frederick Douglass I've ever read, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, I got scorched a little bit by that Frederick Douglass depiction. But it is funny. And Frederick Douglass in real life was married to a black woman and had a white mistress, and they lived in the same house together. I mean, you can't do that in Brooklyn now. I mean, I don't know where you can do it. I mean, maybe there are places where you can do it, but I mean, my point is that it's just ripe for cracking a joke about it.
Well,
how many people knew that you are going to see that in this series?
Right.
You're going to see his wife, his mistress.
Right.
Frederick Douglass, Frederick Douglass lived a free life.
Yeah, he did.
And so I did some research, and he had 5 children with his wife Anna, who is also an abolitionist. But once the children started, she had to stay at home and keep the fort down with the 5 children while he went and did what he did. But before, just like James McBride said, he had a wife, a black wife, and then he had this mistress, and they were staying in the house together. And there are letters that when she died, she purposely said for them to burn. And Frederick Douglass's descendants happily burned their side of the letters.
Okay.
When she died, all of her, I think her name is Alethea, but we're going to know that because on Monday, we're going to be going over Frederick Douglass on observations, #observations TFR. Right now, #TFR podcast live OB. We're going to be going over, the Frederick Douglass, and we're going to be laying out everything and looking at the complexity of a man that was an abolitionist. So we come on Monday through Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, with #observations TFR. That's myself and my sister, my special guest host, my sister Tanya M. Congress. And on Monday, we're going to be talking about Frederick Douglass. So you're going to want to definitely tune in for that. Make sure that you share right now. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you tag your people in it to let people know that we're on right now and get ready for Monday, right? So let's continue on with this because it's interesting to learn about people and that, it's not as clean as you would think it is.
Not long after I decided them proclamations, an old tottering Irishman teetered into Dutch Henry's and sat in Pod's barber's chair. Wasn't nothing special about him. There was 100 prospecting prairie bums wandering around Kansas territory in them days looking for a lift west or a job rustling cattle. This drummer weren't nothing special. He was a stooped, skinny fella, fresh off the prairie, smelling like buffalo dung, with a nervous twitch in his jaw and a chin full of ragged whiskers. His face had so many lines and wrinkles running between his mouth and his eyes that if you bundle him up, you could make him a canal. His thin lips was pulled back to a permanent frown. His coat, vest, pants, and string tie looked like mice had chewed on every corner of him, and his boots was altogether done in. His toes stuck clean through the toe points. He was a sorry-looking package altogether, even by prairie standards, but he was white. So when he sat in Pa's chair for a haircut and a shave, Pa put a bib on him and went to work. As usual, Pa worked the top end and I done the bottom, shining his boots, which in this case was more toes than leather. After a few minutes, the Irishman glanced around and seeing as nobody was standing too close, said to Pa quietly, "Are you a Bible man?" Well, Pa was a lunatic when it came to God, and that perked him right up. He said, "Why, boss, I surely is. I knows all kinds of Bible verses." The old coot smiled. I can't say it was a real smile, for his face was so stern it weren't capable of smiling, but his lips kind of widened out. The mention of the Lord clearly pleased him, and it should have, for he was running on the Lord's grace right then and there, for that was the murderer, old John Brown himself, the scourge of Kansas territory, sitting right there in Dutch's Tavern with a $1,500 reward on his head and half the population in Kansas territory aiming to put a charge in him. Thank you.
So you see the way that is described in the writing, you are going to enjoy the good Lord Bird.
I mean, it's a great show because, like, just now I was like looking up the they have a list of the different quotes from the show and online, because you know when we was watching it today, there were a few quotes that I had to like pause and say, listen to what he just said, and just, I mean, the writing is great. Writing.
He can turn a phrase.
He can turn a phrase, and I mean, just to show that he can turn a phrase, all of the quotes are online. Yeah. So I mean, it's a beautiful piece. What would you give the good Lord Bird? I would definitely give it a 10. I mean, 10 plus. I mean, because like you said, it's well written. It moves quickly, like, you know, the action, and it just makes sense. It's like, it's smart writing. Right. And then we talked about like just when you describe like the parlor and everything. I mean, they did. It's the period piece. It looks like a period piece. So they did a great job as far as like the architecture and like the clothing and the makeup, and great show.
Cinematography, the movement of the camera in this, the battle sequences, the dramatic acting on it, and how the camera catches it with the various angles and lens sizes. That's a 10.
Yeah.
Storyline, through line, that's a 10. Character arc. The character of Onion is constantly arcing because he starts out as a person that's an enslaved person that's only seen one place his whole entire life up to that point. And then he's moving through and he's constantly arcing as he gets more life experiences. That's a 10.
And the thing about it is now that we're talking about this, everything happened so fast, and he was with his father growing all of his life. He was with his dad, right? And then he has truly arced because, you know, can a person, you'll see it once you watch it.
Nothing away.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a young man, and he's a teenager, so he's not even a man yet, right?
Right.
So he's a young man, and maneuvering in this world. And if you haven't seen it, you'll see the first episode, and you'll see the tragedy that happens to this young man. And It's amazing. He's an amazing character.
Because if he's 17,
right,
and he spent 17 years with John Brown leading up to Harper's Ferry,
right,
he's 34 when this odyssey ends. He's a full-grown man. He starts out a child. And 17 years pass. Let's say he's 17. 17 years pass. He's 34 years old. When you see how those double digits, I often tell people, when you're 9, 11 years pass and you're 20. You're 19, 11 years pass and you're 30. Right, 29, 11 years pass and you're 40.
Right.
You say, where'd the time go? So he's 17. Let's just say he's 17. 17 years pass. He's 34 years old by the end of this journey that he took. It's like the Hobbit or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, wardrobe and period. The period piece. That's 10.
Yeah.
Virginia as a character. That's a 10. Story beats, that's a 10. Believability, that's a 10. Historical facts in the film, in the series, that's a 10. The Good Lord Bird is a 10. You have to see The Good Lord Bird. We are going.
Because James McBride, he does such a great job, like with the writing. Like, I'm gonna have to get the book.